Welcome back to the founder stage of the virtual edition of the Black is Tech Conference 2023. We have an exciting session lined up to empower, inspire, and uplift what we believe is the very core of the Black impact in tech, Black founders. And in these next 2 days, we'll be doing just that. Again, my name is Liberty Madison, that tech girl, and I'm super excited to share this experience with you all. Our first session for this stage is entitled, It's Okay to Pivot, Rechanneling and Refocusing, the Keys to Scalable and Sustainable Tech Startup. Get ready to learn valuable insights in adapting and thriving with your business in an ever-evolving tech landscape.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction. I'm so happy to be here with you all today. So I'm going to start today by telling you about one of the happiest days of my life. I'm surrounded by music, friends. I smell the fresh paint on the walls. I see my life savings on the racks around me because I'm opening my very first storefront. That was one of the most joyful days of my life. Being able to start my own business, know that I am in charge of my destiny, feeling really supported and loved by my community. But before that day, as I was still building, I heard a lot of doubts. I had people ask me, "Why would you open an ethically made store? Nobody cares about that, right? You can just buy everything online." I would also hear, "Why brick and mortar? Nobody goes to stores anymore. Everything just gets delivered." And then lastly, the doubt that I would hear that actually would hurt my feelings probably the most was why Oakland? People would ask me, "You're opening your first business there. Aren't you scared?" And all of those things were really frustrating to hear and really disappointed. But whenever people would ask me those things, my answer would always be $2 billion. $2 billion are lost annually from Oakland in what's called retail leakage. So this is money that could be spent in our community that is spent outside of our community. So in Oakland, people are going to San Francisco, Walnut Creek, or Emeryville to spend their money outside of where they live, away from their neighbors. I got really frustrated with that. I found that number when I was still in planning school. I was doing my master's in city planning. And all of these conditions that people had lots of doubts about have long-standing policies that I probably don't have enough time to talk about, but things ranging from redlining to disinvestment, white flight, all of those things led to people really being doubtful of the power of a small business led by people of color in their community. All of that to say, I was able to start that business and run it successfully for 5 years because I saw that there was a real need, and with that, a real opportunity to help and solve a problem. My ability to do that skill set to spot an opportunity to help is what led me into a really incredible entrepreneurial journey that started with brick and mortar business all the way to a SaaS solution in tech. So I'm going to share a little bit about some of the twists and turns and pivots that came with my journey, some of the roadblocks and hardships that came along with that. And I want to share this in the spirit of letting you all know that it really is okay to be on the path that you're on. You never really know where it's going to lead you. And so I'll start with sharing 4 pivots. Well, maybe more like 4.5. But before I do that, I have to tell you a bit of my story and what led me to that very joyful day of starting my very own first business. I grew up in Hawaii, the product of a single parent in affordable housing on a redeveloped brownfield site. Based on my statistics, I felt that, looking at the census, I wouldn't have a whole lot of educational achievement, health outcomes are worse, wealth outcomes are worse for people of color. And so knowing all of that, I really wanted to get to the root of why that exists. Why is that disparity there? So obviously, in knowing all of those statistics, I decided my solution would be to go to architecture school, try to understand why our built environment is the way that it is, finish that in 3 years. So I earned my bachelor's at 20. After being in architecture school, I figured out that's actually not the solution to solve those disparities. So I went to planning school. I did my master's in city planning at UC Berkeley, specifically studying public space and pseudo public space and economic development. And in that same year, I made my very first big pivot. At 23, I had finished my master's, and I decided, after all of that time studying and trying to understand policies and why things weren't changing in the city that I love, I figured I needed to go do something myself. So that same year that I finished school, I actually went on to start my very own business, Viscera, the brick and mortar storefront that I shared a little bit earlier. And with that, I had a theory of change, that if you could connect people with the things that they purchase, the people that they support, where their dollars go, we can actually change the way that consumers make decisions and build stronger neighborhoods. In that capacity, as my brick and mortar kind of lifestyle business founder, I was fortunate to be featured in the SF Chronicle, 7x7, Thrillist, many more publications. And in that first business, one of the key things that I learned was that I could never achieve the same amount of change as someone with a lived experience as from theory. So even though I, had the training in city planning, even though I had the background in architecture, my voice was much more heard, and it resonated more as someone with lived experience as an entrepreneur with a brick and mortar storefront in my city. So with that in mind, I always led with empathy, really was participating quite a bit in city council, different initiatives. That kind of led me to pivot number 2. I really worked to bring some of our small businesses together, got to know my neighbors, one of the things that I love most about small business. And I started taking on some freelance design clients. People would come into the store and ask me, who did your design? Who built out your space? Who did your photography? And the answer would always be me. So I started taking on some freelance clients here and there. And that actually today turned into being a full-blown second business. What I found in that time was that when people were looking for freelancers and looking for people to help support their business journey, they wanted somebody who not only knew the skill set, but knew their experience. It's so incredibly valuable to be able to speak from that place of experience and have a genuine understanding of what it's like. There's, for anyone here who's listening, who is a founder, it's much more than just a series of tasks that you're following. It's actually quite a bit more about the mental journey, the resilience that needs to be built in that, persistence, probably more than resilience. And so with that experience, leading from a place of empathy, leading from a place of being able to say, yeah, I've been there. That second pivot was starting my freelance business. Come pivot kind of 2.5. We all know what happened March of 2020. Prior to that date, I had joined the board of the Oakland Indie Alliance, which is a group of independently owned small businesses, almost 500 of them, everything from restaurant owners, brick and mortar owners, salons, everything that makes up your city, these businesses that you really frequent regularly. So I had joined that group because I started to interact more with other small business owners. And in March 1st of 2020, they asked me to become their first executive director. So this was a brand new organization, or not brand new, but a relatively small organization. And I was brand new in that role. So, March 1st comes around, I'm figuring I can help to provide some structure, some support, and then the pandemic rolls around. In 2020, we went from being a $20,000 a year organization to a $400,000 a year organization almost overnight, having to raise COVID relief funds. We raised a grant fund for broken windows during the summer of 2020, obviously we were very supportive of the protests that happened that summer after the killing of George Floyd. And we knew that small business owners were going to be the ones to suffer those consequences. I won't get too far into it, but essentially the only building left standing in our downtown that wasn't affected was the police station, and that didn't feel right. So we raised funds to help be really a catalyst in our community, and all of that showed me that collectively together as small businesses, we are so much stronger than if we try to go it alone. So in that kind of second 2.5 pivot 2.5, I went from being, a small business owner, brick and mortar owner for about 5 years, doing a little bit of freelance on the side, to now being the ED of a growing nonprofit and also participating and implementing quite a bit more progressive advocacy on behalf of our small businesses. So leading, for example, a progressive business tax, advocating for more budget in our city for small business support, for economic development. And all of that really led me into my third big pivot. So this was going from just being a freelance designer, taking on projects here and there, to growing into a full-blown design studio. So, after 2020, lots more people found that they actually needed a website, they needed design, they needed marketing. And suddenly I went from taking projects every couple of months to having kind of an overwhelming amount of work. And so I hired my first employee, my studio manager. And today we're a staff of 5 full-time with 4 contractors. And we support so many different types of small businesses with our design work. As we've grown and we've had more impact on our community, we've actually transitioned from working directly with small business owners to organizations that support small businesses. Again, with that idea in mind that I want to have a big impact on where our money goes and how our consumers think about the things that they purchase and the power of their wallets. So as we've transitioned to working specifically with small business owners into organizations, obviously I know deep down that impact is the right place for us to be. But one of the things that I couldn't quite shake is missing my small business owners, right? Like, those are the clients that led me into this. Those are the clients that I felt like I could really connect to and help them scale up their business because I understood it from a place of empathy, from experience. And so as we moved away from working with as many small business owners, I came up with pivot number 4. And that is to build a tech solution to support small businesses at scale. When small businesses come to us, or even growing businesses, there's often a few key things that are happening. One, as a solo founder or as a growing business, you're probably overwhelmed, right? There are so many different components of your business. It can be really challenging to know where to focus, where to prioritize. The second challenge is a lack of experience, right? Once you know better, you do better. But if you haven't started a business before, if you aren't familiar with marketing or design or photography or how to build your team, all of those things are brand new, and it can be really scary to feel like you're making the right decision, right? This is the power of having mentors, having community, other folks who can support you. And then, of course, lastly, the challenge is the sort of digital divide, and having, traditional lifestyle businesses be able to keep up with changes that are happening, keep up with AI, all of these other emergent technologies. And so to solve some of those problems, those 3 main things that we see often at the studio, we're building a SaaS solution that can help small businesses at scale. The quick way that I describe it is that it's a digital management consultant in your pocket. So we're replicating some of the things that we do as a studio with our clients directly, and translating that into a SaaS product. So our product essentially takes all of those disparate things that make up a business, right? Your marketing, your finance, your product management, operations, strategy, and putting that all in one place. So that's to combat some of the overwhelm. Secondly, to combat some of the lack of experience, we're building in not only advice from us through our experience, but using predictive machine learning to actually make recommendations based on your business's scale, your business's region, and your business's industry. So these are all things that you would normally get from a consultant like me, who would say, oh, yeah, I've had another health and beauty client. The thing that they did that really helped them was X, Y, or Z. Or the thing that I saw be unsuccessful was X, Y, or Z. And so we're trying to translate some of those same recommendations that come from a place of experience into this digital product to be able to help more businesses at scale. I'm excited to share that with this fourth pivot, we are actually semifinalists in the Black Ambition Prize. And so for anyone who's not familiar, that's Pharrell Williams' prize that he's done, I think, for a few years now. And so we're building it at scale. It wouldn't have been possible for us to go from, for me to go from a small brick and mortar founder all the way to starting a SaaS tech solution without all of those smaller pivots in between. That's, I think, really what gives me my advantage. And I really want to encourage anyone else who feels like, maybe they're on a meandering path or they're not crystal clear on what step 1, 2, and 3 is going to look like, that's okay. That's actually a huge part of your journey. And that's a huge part of your experience and what really makes it possible for you to do things differently than anyone else. So in sharing the story of how I went from a grad student in city planning to a brick and mortar shop owner, to leading a nonprofit for small businesses during COVID, starting a professional services studio, to a SaaS product, there are a few things that I want to kind of crystallize and hand to you as the audience. One, as I've mentioned, is to trust your gut and trust your journey. So many times along the way, as I've shared, I've had lots of people project their own self-doubts onto what I'm doing. I've also, in a lot of ways been building things differently than people in my industry. Again, we know that we're underrepresented in business. And sometimes being unconventional means that you have to really rely on yourself and rely on that instinct. There's been few times where I haven't listened to, or I have listened to my instinct where it's been wrong. And so I want to encourage anyone, again, who's along this path to trust their journey, to trust their gut, and know that in time it'll work out. Along those lines, as a city planner, as somebody with a more technical background, I'm someone who enjoys planning, right? I love laying out a plan and a strategy, and I can have the best Gantt chart, the best project management, and yet things always turn out even better than I could have imagined. And so sometimes those things that feel like a roadblock or a barrier, they really turn out to be redirections. If I hadn't taken on that role with the Indie Alliance leading a nonprofit, I wouldn't have learned about fundraising. If I hadn't taken on, a few of those freelance clients, I wouldn't have understood what it's like to be a consultant. So all of those things, even if in the moment they don't quite feel like they're on your plan, they're not on your route, trust in the process that things always turn out even better than you could imagine. Thirdly, people are key. You need your community, you need your friends and your loved ones who can reflect back not only what they're hearing, but know you. They know you deeply, and they know how to support you in those really challenging times. I wouldn't have been able to start the studio. I wouldn't have been able to start my first business without people. All of that required friends coming through at that final hour when, maybe I didn't have enough staffing, or if I needed a recommendation or a referral to a new client. That all relied on people. And so don't underestimate the power of social capital, because it isn't just about cash. It isn't just about fundraising. It's about your social capital and who you can call on when you really need that support. And then last key that I've found in my entrepreneurial journey is that if you give yourself space, you can often spot some of those opportunities in that unpredictable path. If we're all always so busy grinding, trying to get to the next thing, we sometimes move too quickly to spot those opportunities. Again, if I had not, if I was so focused purely on the shop and really rushing to get from point A to point B, I would have missed out on that opportunity to freelance, which essentially led me into the studio and led me into this SaaS product. And lastly, just to close, some of the things that I want to share specifically for founders who are underestimated, us as people of color, us as Black folks. There are some superpowers that do come from that experience of being underestimated. I know it's challenging. I know it's unfair, and I know it takes a level of persistence that our white counterparts don't have to have. But I want to highlight and lift up some of those skills that come from that experience. One, we have the ability to do more with less, right? That's something that within investment, folks are always looking for. Statistically, women and people of color return more money back to their investors. Second is in spotting opportunities. We often are not getting resourced. We're not getting the same help that other folks do. And so we're able to see those opportunities to solve a problem for whether it's, for your neighborhood, whether it's for small businesses, you're able to see those opportunities. And then lastly, while we do have a fear of failure, we're maybe a little bit more persistent with that, right? We know that with coming from maybe challenging backgrounds, that failure is all relative. We can trust in ourselves and our ability to lift ourselves up with community, with one another. And so with that, I want to thank you all so much for your time today and for letting me share my story. I really encourage all of you to go after your goal. If you find that big juicy problem that you want to solve, trust the process that takes you there. It's not anything predictable, but it'll be so much more worthwhile in the end. Thank you.
Wow, what a fantastic start to the founder stage. As we take a short break, we encourage you to check out the expo and engage with recruiters and teams from our sponsor companies. Also, don't forget to use the hashtag BlackIsTech2023 in your post and connect with the broader tech community. We will see you after the break.